Hey friends, Rob Phoenix, Powwow guy here. Hope you're all doing well. Um, Wanted to pop in, say hi, and also talk about something that's really important. That's something that people have constantly been like, I don't know, making commentary to me about. Hang on one second. I just gotta. So over the years, countless people have accused me of misappropriating a Native American culture by using the word powwow for my practice. Number one, I did not come up with the name of the practice. So there are two possible explanations why the tradition, actually three, well, two and a half, I'll say. Um, Back in the 1800s, the tradition didn't really have a name. Retroactively, we've been calling it brauerei, meaning to use or to try. Um, it was like somewhere in the mid 1800s where something changed and the tradition became known as powwow. And the two explanations are number one, there was a man named Peter Saylor, and he was a very well known powwow doctor in uh, Robsville, I think, in Bucks County. So he was like super well known. And not only was he super well known, but he had tons of people coming to his house like I don't know if it was every day or every Sunday or whatever, but they said there would be horse and buggies and even some cars, like if there were cars invented then, I guess. But um, also, a lot of his clients were the local Native Americans. Um, and the early Pennsylvania German, the early settlers kind of have to go back a little bit. Most of the early settlers were German. They from the Deutschland, which is why they're called Pennsylvania Dutch. And then in later years, that it was more German speaking people coming from, like my ancestors, Austria and Switzerland, also Germany and such. And they all became lumped into what's called Pennsylvania Dutch or Pennsylvania German. The terms are used interchangeably, but Pennsylvania Dutch are generally the people who came first from Germany, and Pennsylvania German are the waves of immigration of German speaking immigrants who came later, who were not necessarily from Germany. I know that's confusing, it's stupid, but there it is. Um, but when those people first came, they were treated very poorly. The United States has a long history of white straight men being horrible to everybody else. And that included anybody that did not speak English. Hmm, funny, that's never changed. So, anyway, when the German speaking immigrants came, including my ancestors from Austria in the 1800s, they were given like certain places in Pennsylvania where they were allowed to live, where they were allowed to settle. And a lot of that was outside of major English territories in Pennsylvania. So, because they were seen as sort of like a buffer between the English snobby people and the Native Americans who were at this point now pissed off at the white man because of the territory. So the German immigrants, German speaking immigrants, excuse me, were put in these zones of danger. Um, but a lot of them, like my ancestors, came here with good intentions. They came here to escape religious persecution by the Catholics, because if you weren't Catholic, you were basically persecuted. I mean, this is where Catholicism was like the evil monster of Europe, and they were literally like beheading the Anabaptists. And my ancestors were what are called Reformed, German Reformed. So you can imagine during the Reformation and Protestants and such, they were all persecuted. And William Penn was like, "Hey, come to Pennsylvania. It's nice here, and you know what? Whatever you believe, you're welcome." And so my ancestors came here. They were members of the German Reformed Church, which now has become what's known as the United Church of Christ. At least here in Pennsylvania, I'm not sure. The Union Church didn't really form in every state, I don't think. They blended with the Union Church and became the United Church of Christ. Um, Extremely progressive Christian denomination here in this Pennsylvania Dutch community. Um, so anyway, my ancestors, I'm very proud that they were a part of that denomination. My grandparents were a part of the same church all the way back until, the Koenigs came in the mid to late 1800s from Austria. So, anyway, sorry I got off on that, but the moral of this story was my ancestors, as well as the German speaking immigrants and the Pennsylvania Dutch, they were not the enemies of the Native Americans. They came here to escape uh, religious persecution and to just be in a place where they could just like worship God the way they felt like they should worship him, and but also to seek prosperity in this new abundant land. And even like the geography of Pennsylvania is very much like uh, many places in Germany. Not so much Austria. Austria has like the Alps and such, so we don't have those kind of mountains here. But German speaking people would have felt at home here and comfortable, and they did, and they settled here, and they put down roots, and they built homes, and they had families, and now here we are today. Here I am. So, sometime in the 1800s, the English started writing about the Pennsylvania Germans who desperately wanted to be American. They forsake their own language in favor of learning English, and the English made sure to stomp out the German language. And that's why even Pennsylvania Dutch was like this bastardized form of German, um, learned by the Anabaptists. But anybody else that spoke it, it was squashed out by the English speaking. Like you had to conform. And the German speaking immigrants did. My ancestors conformed. They behaved themselves. They conformed because they really wanted religious freedom. They didn't get a whole lot of other kind of freedoms. But anyway, here we are. So the Native Americans were essential to the Pennsylvania Germans because they taught our ancestors the local flora and fauna. They taught us, I say us, but I wasn't there. They taught us like the medicines and such that grow here. It was not the same as where they were from. It was very different. So thankfully, the Native Americans were very helpful in passing on that information. Um, but there was a lot of animosity between like white men and Native Americans and blah blah blah. William Penn was very instrumental in like creating peace there. So Pennsylvania is it has a good history. It has a lot of bad, but it has a lot of good and people with good intentions, at least trying. So at one point there was a well-known broker healer, Peter Saylor, and his family, and there was another family, the Wilhelms, maybe, but they're not so much. But the Sailors, they were administering their healing. Peter Saylor was administering healing to everybody, and a lot of his clients were Native Americans, the local Native Americans in Bucks County. And apparently, at one point, they said to him, "You are a great powwow man." Powwow. That's the word they gave to him. Well, the name kind of stuck. And when the English sort of republished, so that's the first explanation is when the Native Americans actually gave that name to him as this healer, you're a great powwow man. And so the second explanation is the English publishing companies were really interested in, they thought Pennsylvania German folk magic was exotic and they didn't have a name for it because there really wasn't a name for it at the time. And so when they learned about this name powwow, they reworked it a bit into the word powwow and it stuck. And because the German speaking immigrants so desperately wanted to be American and speak American and English, uh, they took on the word that the English gave them as powwow. So the Native Americans called us powwow, and the English changed that to powwow, and it stuck. It was in no way a denigration of like Native American culture or anything. The word powwow, specifically Powwow, wasn't given to the Native American gatherings until like the early 1900s. So technically, the word powwow was a made up word by the English used for this folk cultural tradition before the Native Americans were using it for their gatherings. It doesn't matter though. There was no disrespect to Native Americans at all. Now, Pennsylvania Dutch powwow or powwow or brockwari has really no elements of Native American anything in it other than well, this is not even a powwow thing. It's just a medicinal thing. Other than our ancestors learned a lot of the ways of the how to plant and garden and harvest here, and the different types of herbs and plants and such that they can get medicines from. So there was a lot of information sharing amongst the Native Americans. And it's my understanding too that in parts of Bucks County, certain of the powwowers there learned certain things from Native Americans. So there was almost a shamanic element to that type of powwow in that specific area, but that's such a small area. Like Pennsylvania German powwow is very much localized. It's very much based on Christian belief, mostly Protestant, even though surprisingly our roots are in medieval Catholicism, but mostly Protestant beliefs. Um, it was prevalent among the Anabaptists, even though they like to think it was not or pretend it was not. But definitely the Protestant, the German Reform, the Moravians, that sort of thing. Um, Catholics somewhat, but not as much because Catholics kind of have their own sort of magic, with all their saints and candles and such with. Um, but anyway, I just wanted to put that out there. So if somebody has a question to me like, why do you need to stop calling it powwow? That's a Native American word. That is my explanation to you. I'm not going to stop calling it powwow because I didn't name the tradition. The name was given to us by the Native Americans and kind of reworded by the English. I mean, it just is what it is. It's 200 years ago. Um, I didn't create the tradition. My goal and intent has never been to disrespect any Native Americans. My ancestors have never had any negative dealings with Native Americans. Uh, yeah, the world was really shitty back then, and what like the white settlers and such did, and I guess Spaniards and such did to Native Americans was fucking terrible. But this country, the United States, our entire history is about white men being horrible to other people. So all we can do is honor our ancestors, recognize that maybe some of them did some really terrible things, and just try to be better. Um, but but I'm not going to apologize or like change the name of a tradition that I didn't create. I just happen to be the most outspoken about it. And maybe I'm the only person like out here making videos about it and writing books about it and teaching it and such. Maybe I am, which is weird to think about, but um, I'm desperately trying to hang on to this tradition that means so much to me because it's very much a part. I was born in Pennsylvania. My ancestors came from Austria to Pennsylvania and settled here. We've been here ever since. I was born and raised in the Pennsylvania German culture. Powwowing is very much ingrained in my life, in my history, in my Christianity, in my ancestors' lives. Um, I'm not going to apologize for that or change it just because somebody thinks I'm being offensive. Those the same people that say they're offended by it are the same people that are, you know, burning smudge sticks and fondling crystals and such. So please stop. Um, these are my explanations for it. I have no control over it, but I embrace it. It was a name given to us by Native Americans. So, anyway, if you have any issues or questions about that, I definitely recommend reading Patrick Dunmoyer's Powwowing in Pennsylvania. Um, he's way more of an academic and a scholar than I could ever hope to be. So, I definitely recommend that book. It's fantastic. Um, but I've given you all the information I have, so I have nothing else. Oh, and if you want to read more about this, it's called Hexenkoff History, Healing, and Hexerai by Ned Heindel, who sadly passed away about 2 years ago. Um, but he talks all about Peter Saylor and the history of powwowing and the history of Hexenkoff, which is a kind of a sacred site, I guess you could say, for powwowers, but also at one prior to that was a Native American sacred site. So, I mean, there's a connection with a lot of different things, but I definitely recommend this book if you have any questions. I don't have any more information to give. I've just told you everything I know about it. So anything you ask me that's outside of this, I don't know the answer. So I recommend you to better heads than me, Ned Heindel, Patrick Dunmoyer. That's really it. So I apologize for all the videos I've been posting lately, but I have a lot to say. So anyway, thank you very much. God bless you guys. Love you, and we'll talk again soon.